I've been putting this off long enough. This is going to be a long video, but I think it's a video that needs to be made. My name is Hannah Maynard. I was a non-consenting client of J-Bar J Youth Services as a resident of their program, the Academy at Sisters in Bend, Oregon, from April 2008 to June 2009. The Academy at Sisters is sold to parents and potential clients as a therapeutic boarding school for troubled teenage girls. Parents are told that in our time there, we would receive individualized treatment, proven therapies, intensive family work, and academic achievement. In my experience there, we did not. Instead, we received emotional manipulation, public shaming, punishment for misunderstood and untreated mental illness and learning disabilities, isolation, and punitive measures that outweighed perceived wrongs and broken rules. All of this was at the hands of undertrained and unqualified staff, case managers, and resident monitors. My first day there, I was extremely upset. My mom didn't tell me where I was going, just that I was going to my new school. I felt deceived, abandoned, and hated. Prior to admission to the academy, I struggled badly with mental illness, and I assumed the role of being a disappointment to my family by acting out, stealing, using drugs, and skipping school. But being sent away had further cemented it, that not even my parents wanted me. That first day, by expressing how upset and confused I was and trying to figure out how things worked and where I was, I found out I was put on HR, or house restriction. I remember being so sad and just standing there crying before bed, and I asked my assigned mentor for a hug. She jumped back and stared at me, then explained that we can't actually hug. And she held her hand out to me with tears in her eyes and offered me a hand hug. It's the only Academy-approved form of physical contact. I went to bed and I cried myself to sleep. This is the first of many, many nights where I did this. House restriction happened when you lost enough behavior points to warrant social ostracization the following day. HR consisted of sitting alone, being last in line to have access to the restroom, medication, and food. You were not allowed to talk to other residents or your family. You couldn't write letters, ask questions in school, go outside, or even look outside. You couldn't draw, listen to music, have a snack, the list goes on. You were in viewable isolation in the form of public shaming, and just looking at other residents or looking out the window would get you put on HR the next day. The longest I spent concurrently on HR was 2 weeks. 2 weeks without any sort of human contact besides beratement, mocking, and scolding from staff. I witnessed other residents on HR for up to 4 weeks at a time. In my first month there, my image issues were deemed to be a problem that held up my acceptance of placement. In an effort to strip me of my previous identity and allow me to focus on my current environment, I was held down in a barber's chair and had my head shaved instead of allowing my unconventional haircut to grow out. I was placed on HR the next day because of my attention-seeking and aggressive behavior following this. I was 16. I became so lonely and desperate to get out and go home that I lied about having a serious health condition and refused treatment unless I received it at home. Staff, knowing that I was lying due to my healthcare provider disclosing my true diagnosis without my consent, allowed me to continue sharing this story with other residents for over a week. This was done to teach me a lesson in the form of a feedback circle, where in self-preservation, other residents sat around you in a circle and told you how your actions affected them. It was vicious and it was destructive. In my feedback circle, staff encouraged my friends and other residents to call me names, tell me I'm a horrible person, tell me I don't deserve their friendship or time. I still carry an enormous amount of shame and self-hatred around this incident, I definitely learned my lesson. I was emotionally brutalized into submission. This incident spurred my 2-week stint on HR. I participated in 3 feedback circles in my time at the Academy at Sisters. In my first one, I was docked behavior points for not participating enough and refusing to work the program because I didn't want to join in on the public shaming of my close friends that had attempted to escape. When I speak of being bent into submission, I reflect mostly on the Academy at Sisters feedback policies. Feedback was the cornerstone of the program. We were expected to constantly and consistently give and receive feedback. If you make the smallest mistake, staff will force the other residents into telling you what you did wrong on the spot. If other residents didn't give you feedback, they would be docked behavior points. We were terrified not to pick each other apart. It would grow into such an anxiety that I would have meltdowns over the smallest mistakes, panic attacks that I would have to hide in the bathroom because if I let my anxiety be seen, I would be shamed, ridiculed, and punished. I walked on eggshells, but had to be on the attack at all times so I wouldn't get punished for not calling out other housemates for their small mistakes. These small mistakes included a perceived rude glance, not wiping down a table correctly, or wearing your uniform improperly. This has led to a debilitating mistrust in others, difficulty in forming genuine friendships and relationships, and the constant fear that I'm always doing something wrong. The ripples of the feedback culture in the Academy at Sisters has left me with an anxiety disorder that is finally being managed. I was forced to continue taking medication that I did not want, Adderall, to control my energy levels for ADHD, which I now know were symptoms of manic depression, which through therapy as an adult, I know is bipolar 2. I was verbally abused, called names, yelled at by a staff member, and put on HR for refusing my medication. This led to, as far as I've been made aware, the one and only incident in my 16-month stay that I saw a licensed mental health care practitioner. I was one of the few that was forced medication, as most of my housemates were taken off of their medications. Antidepressants, birth control, and mood stabilizers they were on before coming into the program. I witnessed the negative repercussions of this in the way of other residents suffering excruciating menstrual cramps, manic episodes, and suicide attempts. These were all used as excuses by staff to dock good behavior points for attention seeking. Even the suicide attempts. One of which led to the resident attempting to hang herself, being cut down by staff and immediately placed in isolation and made an example of for such excessive attention seeking. She never received medical or professional psychological attention following this. A big part of our therapy was a group treatment led by the one licensed counselor at our facility. If she was gone, the group would instead be covered by varying unlicensed and unqualified staff who would read from a DBT book designed for children and would guide our conversations. Outside of the weekly group therapy, we would have one-on-one treatment with our assigned case managers, wherein they would go over our treatment plan's progress, our mistakes through the week, and discuss our errors in judgment, thinking, and behavior. The fact that J-Bar-J aggressively sells this program as a therapeutic boarding school when our primary therapy was administered by unlicensed staff is incredibly damaging. According to the Academy at Sisters' own website, my 2 case managers are only certified in crisis prevention, suicide prevention, and child abuse prevention. I can only imagine the genuine progress I could have made if I had seen an actual qualified therapist while I was in such a genuine time of crisis and transition. But instead, I had a former correctional officer and someone certified in motivational interviewing, all while my parents were told I was in a therapeutic setting. I developed a severe eating disorder while at the Academy at Sisters. We were forced to clear our plates to get up from the table, and if we didn't, we lost good behavior points that could mean no socializing, no phone calls to our families, no leaving the house, and the loss of other basic rights. This resulted in me overeating constantly, 3 to 6 times a day between meals and snacks, whether I was hungry or not. I was afraid to not eat all the food in front of me, and that anxiety followed me throughout my life. My binge eating spiraled for over 10 years until I received medical intervention. At an early age, I was diagnosed with a learning disability to the point that I spent a year of pre-academy at Sisters schooling in special education. The Academy at Sisters' selling points centered around academic excellence and individualized attention in the schoolhouse, but more often than not, I experienced ableism, and again, was publicly shamed for not being able to keep up. While I was able to graduate high school because of my time there, my anxiety around classes and schooling has made it extremely difficult to begin college. On several occasions, our teachers would mock and belittle me for being unable to understand my low-level schoolwork, especially in math. I would get docked behavior points for failing math tests. If we didn't do well in school, we wouldn't be allowed to see or speak with our families and support systems, even going so far as to being put on HR. This meant that I was being actively punished for having low comprehension skills and being unable to understand the coursework that our parents were told would be individualized. One resident was put in a small separate classroom because her developmental disabilities prevented her from doing her schoolwork to the same level as the rest of us, and her inability to regulate her emotions were deemed a distraction. She would be left alone in that room while the rest of us sat and worked together for weeks at a time. She was in clear view of the rest of us. Her loneliness and mistreatment would often lead to violent outbursts, which would keep the isolation cycle going, both inside the schoolhouse and out. One of the most disturbing things I saw was the isolation. This was a step further than house restriction or close staff. Close staff happened when residents would mention suicide, mention running away, or mention hurting someone. You were not allowed to wear shoes or pants and had to sleep on the floor in the main hallway. The no shoes, no pants policy was followed all day, even at school and mealtimes. It was degrading and humiliating for kids that were clearly in intense emotional and psychological distress. Isolation, on the other hand, would last weeks to months at a time. No shoes, no pants, locked in a small room with maybe a book, usually the therapy book provided to us, your journal, and a mattress on the floor. I vividly recall an incident where the previously mentioned resident with developmental disabilities had an episode. She ran at a staff member who took her down, threw her to the ground in an armbar takedown, then flipped the resident to face away from her. The staff member put her in a chokehold to drag her screaming into the storage wing where the isolation room was located. She was left there for several weeks. Residents would be brought back from running away, freezing or overheating in the Central Oregon elements, always exhausted, and they were thrown in isolation. They would emerge weeks later with the spirit gone from their eyes, completely broken and having to start again from level 0, where you start when you first enter the program or misbehave enough to get dropped down again. I entered the program at 16 and I am now 29. Since leaving the Academy at Sisters, I have struggled enormously, just as I have seen a majority of my fellow survivors. As an adult, I have trudged through drug and alcohol abuse, low self-worth, abusive relationships, evictions, job instability, intense mental illness, and numerous suicide attempts. I have never attended college. I have never held down a job longer than 2 years due to my emotional instability. a painfully fractured family dynamic that we have only begun to heal will be rebroken through me speaking about my traumas built in the academy. These are all issues that the Academy and Sisters promised my parents would be avoided if they sent them the money every month for my treatment. A check that amounted to $5,500 monthly. This is more than double the monthly cost of room, board, and tuition at Harvard University. And now the monthly tuition for the Academy and Sisters has gone up to over $9,000 per month. My parents continued to pay the same amount even when I attended public school during my last 4 months there. I haven't had health insurance to seek therapy until very recently. Rebuilding myself, healing myself, and learning to love myself through this therapy has allowed me to start addressing the traumas and pain inflicted upon me at the hands of Academy and Sisters and JBAR-J staff and administration. Finding other survivors to validate my experiences and traumas caused by JBAR-J and the Academy and Sisters has been one of the greatest gifts I've received in my life. Finding organizations and politicians willing to help us has given me something I had been stripped of so long ago in Bend, Oregon. It's given me hope. This testimony barely scratches the surface of what we endured. Some residents had it much worse than me by being zeroed in on by staff, including being forced to wear diapers that they would have to publicly display, having to watch their families walk away without a word exchanged after 6 months of separation because the resident was on house restriction when they arrived, and other excessive punishments. The extent of these harsh injustices do not diminish what we all live through collectively. The fog on my memory has finally started clearing, and I can see what I lived through for what it is. Trauma, started by deception and false marketing to my parents, emboldened by painting a narrative about me and my mental illness that fit theirs, and sealed by constant reminders that anyone who struggled after releasing or dared criticize the Academy, well, they were simply failures, that they didn't work hard enough, that they were bitter because they didn't graduate from the program or they were unstable. This fed the beast that was the intense brainwashing we were subjected to. I still have so much anxiety about speaking publicly regarding my time spent at the Academy and Sisters, thinking that I will be punished somehow. But I have to speak my truth. All we are asking for is a change to this broken system, and something resembling oversight and accountability. Even incarcerated individuals have access to an ombuds system, and people living in other residential treatment settings have ombudsmen too. Why were we not given the same representation? Why aren't current residents of the enormously numbered Oregon Troubled Teen programs not given this voice? Why were we relegated to the shadows to be abused like this? It's not okay. And I'm still paying the price for having my voice taken. I just hope that our voices are loud enough now to be heard. Follow Breaking Code Silence for more information on what you can do to help this movement and to help give more people a voice.